I used to get so frustrated both doing stand-up on TV and watching stand-up on TV. I used to get so frustrated because everything that to me was exciting about stand-up had to be cut out in order to be on TV. You had to make your mark, you have cameras and this and that, and everything you do as a stand-up had to adapt for the production.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what if we did it the other way around? Like, what if we decided the production should adapt to the reality of stand-up that we find exciting?
Dystopia tonight. Dystopia tonight.
Hey,
what's going on, man?
Thanks so much for having me on your last ever podcast. I'm so honored.
Yes, this is the last one. We wanted to go out with a bang. That is hilarious.
It's the greatest titled podcast ever.
It's what's really funny is that you broke up and then you were like, "This is the greatest titled podcast," and then it ended, and then you broke up again. And I was like, "What? Finish the sentence."
Yeah, but that would be a perfect way for your last podcast to end, though. So
yes,
kind of thematic. I'm working with the electronic universe.
I appreciate that. That's how we're gonna plug it. I really was, dude. I was up late. HBO. I'd never seen this movie before. I thought it was great. It was Odd Jobs.
Oh my God!
Wow. Paul Reiser, Rick Overton,
Robert Townsend. Yeah, Julianne Phillips was in that.
Yes.
Right, as well as Eleanor Mondale is in it. What a bizarre cast! The whole thing was
a bizarre cast. Yeah,
the whole movie was obviously it was like when this whole thing came together. And I got cast, and I was so excited to be in a movie with Reiser and Townsend and Overton and all these great comics. A few other cameos in there I can't remember.
Right.
But and the director is this guy who he had done like a ton of commercials that were really funny.
Mm.
And so we were all excited about this, and he let us play in front of the camera and make shit up, and we were so excited about this. And every once in a while they would let us watch some not dailies per se, but what they call rushes, which are like little assemblies of scenes that he put together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd watch these scenes, and it was so funny. When the whole movie got put together, it was like he could only be funny in 60-second bursts, like a commercial. And the whole thing together was just like it just fell apart, and it just wasn't. It's not my favorite movie in the world. There are a few funny things in it, but it was so interesting to experience firsthand a sort of Peter principle at work, that this guy could do the most hilarious 60-second bites.
Yep.
And then he went on to create TikTok. Perfect.
Well, actually, I think it was his first feature too, and so I don't think his career took off after this. But in 60-second bursts, it was to these hillbillies or something like that, and that scene was so funny. We were gasping how funny it was. But then when the whole movie was together, it was just like, why was this so funny? And now it's not.
Yeah, it was very much like that. It's like those guys now who can only do trailers and the rest of the movie fucking sucks. Like a minute trailer is hilarious.
Yeah. That's kind of what this situation was. But we had a blast making it. It was so fun just being on a set with so many comics where it was playful and loose.
Well, that's the thing I noticed the most, man, is that it was clear that everybody knew each other and you guys had that kind of relationship and were kind of fucking around, and it had like a very coming of age diner feel to it almost,
that's what it was originally. The concept was for it to be like, it was later than this, but it was kind of written as one of those 80s teen movies, like one of those, like, weird sort of like raunchy kind of teen movie, like a Porky's kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But there was real discord between the producers and the director and everything. They just decided they didn't want it to be that kind of a raunchy movie, but
Right.
it wasn't anything else. So they ended up taking out the stuff that was the reason that somebody paid to make this movie in the first place, which was to make one of those kind of movies.
Right.
So it was trippy, but it was weird. But I can't believe you saw it. I'm actually shocked. I didn't even know it was actually anywhere to be had. They changed the title a couple of times.
It did? It was the weirdest thing, man, because I knew obviously you were coming on this week, and I'm just fucking awake at like 3:00 in the morning, and I'm flipping through the channels, and I see a movie called Odd Jobs, and then it said on the very bottom of the thing like Paul Provenza, and I was like, what the fuck? So then I looked it up, man, and it was all of you in it, and I caught it right in the beginning too, so I got the whole thing, but I watched it, and it was like this is like a cool piece of comedy.
It is it's a little time capsule thing there, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And also anything before cell phones is just kind of cool at this point. You know what the funny thing is I think it's hilarious that we'll watch movies now and be like, oh, what do people do when they're broken down on the side of the road back then? You couldn't call anybody. I hate to break it to people, but no one I know is up at 1:00 in the morning anymore for me to call anyway. Like everybody has their phone on fucking silent or do not disturb. So it's the same shit.
And you had to go and find a highway phone. Which was like, in the best of times, they were like a mile apart. So that, the closest you could possibly be is half a mile. And then you were lucky if it worked and you could get through to AAA,
Yeah. I love those movies where it's like they break down and it's a guy and a girl and the guy's like, I'll walk just to be safe. And I'm like, she's also not safe, just hanging back, right?
Just hanging back in a dark.
I'm like,
cell phones have ruined so many scripts. Like there's so many. It's so funny. I love watching movies where you just know that if they had cell phones, the movie would have been over in 10 minutes.
A couple text messages would have saved.
So you got to watch them figuring out how to not have a phone available.
Right.
I saw one movie where you can see that after the fact they just kind of shot a scene of a guy feeding his fish in a fish tank, and the phone falls out of his pocket into the fish tank to explain why he doesn't have a cell phone later on. Or you can see them like struggling, going through hoops to try and say, how can we justify not having phones? Because otherwise, this is not a problem.
Yeah. Our hero walks too close to a magnet and the phone just fizzles or whatever. And you're like, I guess he does. You know what move I love in a movie? When I know shit's going to go down is when people do this. And then they're like, oh, okay. That's the I can't find a signal pose.
Right.
And they're all going to get murdered.
Yeah. And they're in the middle of downtown Chicago. There's no signal.
I know. Yeah. What could be going on? A giant monster is attacking the city and all our cell phones are down.
I think we need a moratorium on stuff. There's just too much stuff. There's too much stuff. There's so much stuff out there. I can't even. I drive up La Brea where they have all these, billboards for, all these TV series and stuff. And I'll be driving up and it'll be like, debuting 9th season of I never fucking heard of half of these things, and they're already in their 9th season. There's just too much stuff.
Or and
I'm not in any of it.
And you're not. Or when a show is ending and everyone's really sad about it. I'm like, I didn't even know it existed. How could this many people be sad? Is it all a scam? Are you all paid actors?
I swear to God, I just don't understand any of it anymore.
No, I don't either. Are you death scrolling at right now with Ukraine? Because that's the thing my friends and I are talking about, where it's like everything that's happening in Ukraine is obviously fucking tragic. It's horrible. But you're going through your phone and it's like breakup, advertisement, food picture, and death. And then and it's just a weird mix right now. And that's how we're getting our information. It's bizarre.
It is. It's so funny too, because sometimes my scroll is essentially random, I suppose.
Yeah.
But as you go through it, it's like you're reading all of that stuff, and then all of a sudden there's news about Kanye. Just illustrates how bizarre and stupid all of that is. When it's in the context of the real universe, which is so psychotic. This is surreal. We're in a sci-fi movie. I'm convinced of it.
Have you heard the theory about 2012? About how in 2012, if you kind of map the trajectory, that's when everything started really getting bizarre, fucking Mandela effect shit, into people remembering different points of time and all that other shit. And they say at 2012, when they found the God particle, because that's when they found it, that's when shit went really haywire.
When they started colliding atoms.
Yeah.
I think it was a little before that. I think it was the smartphone that really sort of put us over the edge. You know, just it's too much to have with you at all times, and to be
Yeah.
able to interact with everybody and everything at any given moment. And yeah, it's just too much. I think before that was perfect. Texting,
Yeah.
little images here and there, was great.
Even situationally, like I think it's so funny. Like, you know, I always think about like why sitcoms kind of suck now. And it's because there's no situation. It's a situational comedy. There's no situations for people left to be in because this gets us out of every situation. You
See, another good point. Another good
man,
point.
that's it. I'm out. Like, but like, yeah, isn't it true that like it's like one of those things where like if you have an entire generation that grows up where they don't have to go out and they can just sit at home and they just text each other. I think we were talking about this where somebody's in the same room, a group of people in the same room. It's really quiet, but everybody's talking to each other because no one's actually saying things out loud, but everybody's texting.
Yeah, you're never with the person you want to be with.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Isn't that the fucking truth?
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
think
I hate being that guy, sounding like that old guy or sort of Luddite or all that sort of stuff. But I just don't think the species can handle this much information at one time.
No, definitely not. Otherwise, you wind up looking like fucking Einstein 24/7 with the hair out and all that other shit. That's intense.
That's the best of circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. We have too many Einsteins. That's the problem.
But look at where it's going too. Now we're gonna go into like whole virtual realms, like where people are just going to live in the metaverse. That's crazy to me.
I know. It's kind of almost it's almost like we're creating, the idea of multiverses and string theory and multiple universes.
Yeah.
Kind of like we're creating that in our own universe, and that seems, I don't know. But it's disconcerting. That's all I can say. It's really hard to get your head around stuff. It's hard to get your head around the technology that you can't even comprehend. I mean, we don't really even understand what's going on with cell phones. I mean, that's all quantum mechanics and shit going on there. We don't even understand it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we could have. I don't know. Did we have a handle on fire when that showed up? I think we. We may not have understood, the science behind combustion, but we could get our heads around fire.
Oh God! You think there was one like teenage troglodyte, and his parents were just like, "You were spending way too much time in front of the fire."
You are. When I was your age, we had to make our own H2O. You had a hydrogen, and you had we had to.
Oh, you just take everything for granted. You think we had to wait for lightning to strike a bush?
Yeah, you kids today.
And your rocks with your science. I love that meme that they've got that goes around where they're like, nobody talks to anybody anymore because everyone's focused on their cell phone. And there's a picture from like the 30s of a train, and everybody's reading
the newspapers. Yeah. That's a great one. Yeah, that's the truth too. But I don't know.
We're always kind of antisocial.
I don't know. All I know is I have never felt. I and most of my peers, and even like a generation or even two younger than I have never experienced such sort of existential, mystery in the day to day. I mean, you throw pandemic into the mix, and
right.
I feel like time has slowed down or stopped, but at the same time, when I leave my house, it's like, there's series that have been on the air for 10 years that I didn't even know about. I just am so discombobulated.
Yeah, you know what the other thing is that marketing has gotten so good at whether or not that series was on for 10 years, it could have been popular, it could have been not popular. They've gotten so good at making it look like you should have known about this, but you forgot.
Oh man, so maybe I'm falling prey to that.
Yeah. Well, you know what's crazy? Do you remember? I don't know if you were a fan of How I Met Your Mother when that show was on the air.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I'm not really. I don't care. I was hesitant to say like anybody's going to give a shit. It wasn't really my cup of tea, right? And I'll tell you why though, because the writers were brilliant at this though. They made a show and they tapped into people's nostalgia without even earning it. Like from episode 1, they were doing flashbacks.
Oh, right. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, you're right.
the jokes, and it made you you either went along with it and you were like, oh, this is great, I know these people, or you were like me, who was going, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
So
But-
nostalgia for characters that don't even have a history yet.
Yes.
That were just created out of thin air. That's really funny.
And they kind of were, but now I feel like everybody's kind of doing that a little bit, which is I don't know. It could be advantageous, I guess, if you know how to manipulate it. I usually don't. Do you, when you're doing stand up though, do you feel inhibited by, like, do you think about people and their cell phones when you're doing new shit?
You know what? I got to tell you, I haven't been performing for a while. I decided to not perform for a few years. It's been about 3 or 4 years now.
Wow.
A little bit here or there, but for the most part, I'm largely that's because I never got my own audience, right?
Okay.
I mean, even at my peak, at the time when the most people were coming to see me that ever came to see me, it was maybe 50-60% of the audience max. And the rest were people that were just going out to see comedy,
Right.
And so I never had, an audience where I could book myself into a theater or something like that, and I could fill it with people who knew who I was.
Right.
And as a result of that, when you get up in a club now, even the showcase clubs here in LA, I'm the oldest person within 100 miles, and it's like a blind date every night. It's like I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to have to explain to you who I am and what I'm about.
Right.
At this point in my, evolution.
Yeah.
And people my age don't go out that much anymore. Like, even, from the fans that I have from way back that are still actually, really interested in what I do, they don't go out.
Right.
So I just found it exhausting. And I found it like, on top of having to deal with, this other stuff, the fact that, for a long time before I backed away, I really got a sense that audiences were really different. I mean, one thing that really, really had been in the air for a long time, and a lot of comics would talk about it whenever I would bring it up. We'd have really interesting conversations. But for a long time, I've been feeling a sense of entitlement from an audience that I thought was just so inappropriate, not for me in general, but just for art in general.
Yeah.
It's like the audience had this thing that I want to see what I want. Fuck whatever it is you're giving us. Like, that's not what I want. And I don't know if it's just that, you can get whatever you want at any given moment, So there's this, it was just this real palpable sense of entitlement that an audience had, where it sort of like defeats the purpose of being original or doing anything, that's idiosyncratic to you,
right?
Specific to you.
Even being spontaneous or like live in the moment. You're not wrong though. That's the thing though too, is it is a hindrance to art because they also think they know exactly what they want, which means they're shutting down from anything new coming in.
That's
so, like,
kind of, and I guess that's kind of, I guess it's another iteration of, the bubble that we get in on social media. I guess it's a variation on that. But having said that, this sense of an audience's sense of entitlement, it's been around a lot longer than social media. Just growing and growing, and it's odd. I wish I were facile enough with the terminology or the sociology of it all to really connect the dots, but it's definitely connected. I just can't really identify it. But something weird has gone on with audiences in general. And again,
do you think it's only live stuff? Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah. Although I'd be very happy if I never see a movie in a movie theater again ever because other people suck. I mean, I have. There is no joy in sharing an experience of watching a movie with a room full of other people. Because everybody's like, they think they're at home, it seems like, and I think that's part of it too, is that something weird has happened where the sort of social order of performer live audience, all of a sudden that's mysterious to audience members. Like, no, you shut up during a show, or you know.
Absolutely.
But having said all of that, I think there's some of the greatest comedy ever happening, and I think there are some phenomenal performers out there, and I've been to shows that are just, amazing. So it's not universal, and it's obviously something that can be overcome. I think to a large extent, my response to it all is somewhat generational, and equally as experiential.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I speak to a lot of young people who have a lot of similar. You know,
No,
I've
it's
spoken
true.
to a lot more and more young comedians. So like this social media thing is killing me. You know,
Yeah,
so
it
it's
is.
more than generational.
Because
And
well, the other thing is too with the social media, it's not like your job as a comedian is no longer just like write material, show up to gig without dying, and then do well and then keep getting better. It's literally like you are social media marketer. You create your own graphics, you create your own memes. You've got to manage 4 different social media accounts. You've got to edit your own videos, and you're still booking your own shows. So you're doing all this shit and it's exhausting. And then you don't actually get to focus on the art.
Yeah, you have to do like 12 jobs now.
Yeah. And people don't
But
realize that.
again, the flip side of that is, that I remember coming up, and I think of all the things that I would sit around with Rick Overton or some other brilliant minds, and just say, "Wouldn't it be funny if?" And we would come up with these ideas and sketches and funny little ideas for video pieces and things like that. But now
Yeah.
you can actually do them. You can do them at zero expense, just
Yep.
about. And I think, wow, God, the amount of stuff that we could have done when you're a young comic and you're just starting to sort of feel your strength and your power creatively, and you're with other people who are brilliant. When all that's going on and the ideas are just flow, so much of them, they just went away, and they were just fun things that we thought about and things that made us laugh, and they just went away. But now you could actually do them, and
Yeah.
I'm sad that we weren't able to do that in those times.
Yeah.
And people are doing it all the time now, and a lot of it's just great.
Yeah. It
So
is
it's a
really.
double-edged sword. There's a lot of great shit that's come with the technology, and a lot of really awful shit that's come with the
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
yeah, for
Do
sure.
you, I mean, because I know you're so creative. Like, so when we talked on the phone, you just have a very comedic mind. Anybody who knows you, I think, has watched you on Green Room. You're always doing it. Um, are you always writing for the anticipation to get back on stage? Like, do you miss the stand up, even though, like you said, you didn't really get to build your own audience?
It's an odd thing. I kind of do, and it kind of really depends on when you ask me. At this moment,
Okay.
I'm right in the middle. But
Mm.
there are times when I think of some stuff and I go, "Holy fuck, this would be," I can see spending some time on this and fleshing it out. It would be a killer piece.
Right.
But I'm 64 years old, and I'm just tired of having to of starting from square one all the
Yeah.
time. You
Yeah.
know, uh, um, and I'm not. It's A, the nature of the business. It's B, choices that I've made, all that sort of stuff. Because I've always been kind of all over the place. I
Mm.
mean, I studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts for a little while. I was doing theater. I was writing. I was doing stand up. I was performing in various little things here and there. And then I started playing around with directing and editing and all of that. And I kind of kept myself. I'm sort of guilty of having kind of undermined my own sort of linear career. You know,
Mm.
I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I'm not really complaining about these things. I'm just kind of explaining them to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why I haven't been going on stage much. And plus, I took about 15 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe closer to 18 years, where I was outside of the country, outside of America, more than I was in America. I started working on the international circuit,
Right.
and that was really, really exciting. And creatively, it was an unbelievable shot in the arm. I started doing that right. I had been traveling overseas and working the international market right around the time. I'd been doing it for a little while, right before I started working on the Aristocrats. And the
Nice.
Aristocrats, I would go away for 2-3 months, and then I'd be back for 4 or 5 weeks, and then we'd get as much done as we could. And then I'd go away again for another couple of months, come back for 2 weeks, and do what we could. So it
Hmm.
was really right smack in the middle of it. I developed a green room at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and I brought
Yeah.
a cameraman friend of mine who brought up other people with cameras, and we actually figure out how if we did turn this into a television show, what would be the most interesting way to shoot it. We were actually moving cameras around and looking at footage and going, because I wanted a certain vibe in my head. I sort of had a vision for it and all. The book Sataristas, I was still working overseas and meeting all these people and talking about the art form to people from around the world all the time. And just all kinds of set list. You know, the first thing I did when we started working with the set list format, which was created by the evil genius Troy Conrad, first thing I did was we booked it into Edinburgh, because you get 28 days in a row to do a show with the most, discriminating comedy audience. In that 1 month, you get like a year's worth of creative development done, because you're doing it every night. Immediately, you can check the results that next day, of whatever changes you make, whatever. So we nailed down the format. And we also knew that the British television landscape was a little more conducive to stand-up than the American TV landscape is. Edinburgh was over at the end of August. By October, we had a deal to do 14 episodes for Sky Atlantic Television.
Wow.
So it was a really tremendously creative time, but I was also not in American show business, basically. I was off doing shit, and I was doing solo shows in Paris and in the Middle East, in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, and
wow.
And we did set list in Austria, and then we made deals with comedians from Argentina and from Egypt to do it in their languages,
Oh my God.
And we would work on the creative end, and then they would do the translations, and then it was really cool. And I did that for a really long time. So it was like, and you know how show business is, like out of sight, out of mind. Well, I was really out of sight for, like I said, more than 15 years. I was hardly ever back in town.
But you have this huge body of work to show for it.
Well, I don't know if huge is the word, but all of it is really careful. I mean, I really, the stuff that I've been doing, it's been kind of I had a clear idea of what I wanted it all to kind of feel like. And so I wasn't just doing gigs, and I wasn't doing things. People weren't calling me and saying, "Oh, we have this project. We want you to be involved." We have to create our own stuff, And all of that is really, really time consuming. But the flip side of that is there wasn't a single aspect of the green room that wasn't completely well thought out in terms of its effect and what it is that we wanted to try and convey. I used to get so frustrated both doing stand-up on TV and watching stand-up on TV. I used to get so frustrated because everything that to me was exciting about stand-up had to be cut out in order to be on TV. You had to hit your mark, you have cameras and this and that, and everything you do as a stand-up had to adapt for the production. And I said, what if we did it the other way around? Like, what if we decided the production should adapt to the reality of stand-up that we find exciting, the spontaneity of it, the speed of it, and that's why we shot the green room the way we did. And I told you, we brought cameras in and we experimented. Like, what's the best way to get this vibe of what I'm feeling from this audience? This audience is really feeling like, and the whole premise of it was some of the greatest, most interesting and times that I've had have been talking with comedians about things other than comedy, philosophy, art, politics, whatever, you name it, because comedians are really, I mean, most of them, I'm not talking about, like if I were talking about music, I wouldn't be talking about garage bands. Okay. So those are not the comedians I'm talking about either. Right. Talking about artists, and really smart, forward-thinking comedians who have some sense of, some vision of what they're doing, and they'd have some manifesto in their work, stated or unstated, I just found, that was life-changing for me when that became a reality in my life when I was like 17. It was absolutely life-changing to me, and it felt like this is a lifestyle. Really, this is a way of existing in the world. And I always wanted to share that with an audience. I felt like if the audience could experience some of that, they would see that it's more than just jokes. So, that was the idea behind the green room. Somebody had this time slot at the Edinburgh Fringe, and they were like, "You can do whatever you want with it." And so I was like, "Let me try this again," because I kind of started experimenting with that in the late '80s with the show I had on Comedy Central, called Comics Only. The premise of which was, when I was a kid, I loved watching The Tonight Show for the comics. I didn't give a shit who else was on.
Right.
And so I thought, what if we do The Tonight Show just with comics?
Yeah.
And so that was the original premise of that. But it was more sophomoric than I had envisioned it to be. And I gave the comics, all the comics on it, I gave them a choice. We can do prepared material. I can set you up and we can do prepared material, or we can just wing it and be spontaneous. You get the choice. And most of the comics at the time wanted sort of a mix of both.
Yeah.
And we were doing weird sketches and bizarre sort of dark material on the sides and all that stuff. But that was sort of from the same impulse of what if, could I convey what it's like to just be surrounded by comedians all the time?
Yeah.
And that was not successful in that regard. It's whatever the fuck it is, that's what it is. But it wasn't quite the thing that drove me. And Green Room kind of was. I was like, I'm going to try this again. And, the whole notion of you're someplace you're not really supposed to be.
Love that.
This is all comedians here, and we don't answer to anybody, and we're going to say whatever we want, and we're going to share it. And if it's funny, we're going to say it, or if not. And it's not necessarily always funny.
Right.
But we wanted that energy of being in the room. In fact, when we were staffing up the show, I was like, I want camera people who've done news and sports. I don't want camera people who are going to wait for somebody to hit their mark. I want them to follow the metaphorical ball. You know? And that's why we shot it in the round.
Right.
And the idea that stuff can come from anywhere and it's going to be covered and it's going to have some sort of dynamic, camera work. And we put the cameras in amongst the people. I remember at one point we were all setting it up. They were like, no, we have to put aisles in here for the cameras. Like, no, the cameras have to figure out how to get where they're supposed to be. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So that was all really, really, really well thought out. Even as much as like the logo, the draw, the opening credits and all, they're an homage to Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
Some real hipsters get that. Some real hipsters go, oh, I see that, which is just one of my favorite movies in the world because it is the perfect synthesis of hilarious, weird, surreal satire and the fucking truth at the same time. And so, the conversations we had on there, I never had an agenda. There were some things like I knew, like when Roseanne was on, I wanted to talk about this photo that she had done for Heat
so
magazine,
good.
So like I had those things ready to go because I wanted to talk to her about them, but we had no agenda. And we made the decision to start the show mid-conversation because we didn't want any of the conventional showbiz forms, any of the conventional TV forms, There's no real introductions. It's like meeting people at a party. Hey, look, John Poveromo just came in. Is that kind of a vibe? We didn't shoot it in a studio. We created a space. We found a dance club here in Los Angeles, and we created a space on the big open dance floor.
Nice.
I didn't want it to feel anything like show business. I wanted to just feel a little bit grittier and rawer. Yeah. And that came from the experience of being in Edinburgh, where it's like this vibe. What happens here is just so free and so creative, and the audience is so supportive of things outside the norm, so that all drove that. So that was a time period where for a great deal of time, I was kind of out of show business here in America, but it was also one of the most creative and inspiring times of my professional life. And so much stuff that I'm so proud of came out of those kind of paradigm shifts that were happening.
Yeah, man. And that was an inspiring time I was, I started comedy in 2005. Green Room came out, and it was one of those things that only made me want to get better, to be able to be around comedians like that constantly, and to be in a green room, like a green room setting that wasn't some shitty open mic somewhere. You know what I mean? Like where it was like, this is where the real conversations happen. One of the things I loved was like the audience was also kind of participatory because there were comedians in the audience watching everybody talk. Whose idea was it to do that?
Here's the thing. Like I told you, there was no decision, big or small, that wasn't all about first of all, the production team, my producing partner, Barbara Roman,
Mm-hmm.
this is just the way she loves to operate. So this was a no-brainer for us together as
Right.
producing partners. But then we brought in, line producers and, sound people and the head of camera and all that sort of stuff. And everybody got onto the same page right away. Because I said, if everybody's on the same page and they just do what they do, we don't have to micromanage any of this, right? Like even the set, we didn't want, people would come in with these ideas for sets and everything. And I'd say, everything feels like a normal set. So we found that the guy who ultimately did it, whose name escapes me at the moment, I apologize so much because he was brilliant. He was a guy who did set design, but his background was in fine art. And I brought him in, and we talked a little bit, and I said to him, I don't want a set, I want an art piece. And he came up with what we ultimately had, which I said, I want it to feel like the basement of a theater or a comedy club. I want to see elements of, that's why people are sitting on beer kegs and stacks of, crates of beer bottles, as well as chairs and pillows on the floor and stuff. I wanted it to be loose, like it wasn't, it wasn't set up like a performance space. He created this piece, which is almost a sort of an arch surrounding of like old wooden chairs and mic stands and pieces of mic stands and some cable around them and lights and light trees, the kind of stuff that if you go to a theater, you go into the basement, there's all the shit that they haven't gotten fixed yet that needs the repairman to come and take a look at all that shit. And he created this thing and I loved it because there was something artful about it, and it was specific and non-specific at the same time. It wasn't a set per se, and it was specific in that everything that he used is some shit you would find in a green room or basement of a club or theater or something like that.
It really made it look like all of you were about to go on.
The audience is the same thing. Like when the first budget was run, there was, I don't know how many, a couple $1,000s for audience services, right? And that's what all talk shows have, audience services that will go and make sure that the audience is full. And they would go to like, the line of people waiting to get in the Tonight Show, and they would hand out tickets and people would show up. It was that kind of thing. And I was like, fuck, let's put that money back in the budget. Let's pay the comedians some more because we don't need that. And the entire audience was invited personally by myself and Barbara Roman. It was our personal email list. So everybody that was in that audience were people who spent time in green rooms.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's incredible. I'm
telling you, there was not a detail that we didn't say what is getting closest to the truth of this, the authenticity of this. I just didn't want an audience in there that didn't belong in a green room. So you had a lot of comics. A lot of comics. There were a lot of agents and managers that showed up. There were a lot of musicians,
Wow.
And as the show went on, we ultimately did 14 episodes, but after the first few, the word got out that this is just like the coolest taping to be at. Because we also had a party beforehand. That was the other thing. I didn't want it to feel at all like, because that was another thing just drove me crazy. If you go to a taping of any talk show, the audience is like, they're like hostages. It's like, you have to stand here, you have to sit there, you can't get up and go to the bathroom until somebody says you can't do this, whatever. People end up starving and thirsty and they can't do anything. We were like, fuck that. We had a party on the patio of this venue before people came in to where we were already sitting in conversation. And then they came in and filled in around us. And it was, around that time that we would end up starting the show that ended up on television. And then we did 2 shows a night. And so everybody would get up, go back onto the patio for more partying. And then come back for the next taping. So word got out that it was just the most fun taping to be at. And by the second season, it was like, we couldn't hold enough people.
Second season was incredible.
And we did a couple at Montreal too, which was fun. That was really good.
Cool too, because I liked when Bill Burr was on, he literally left in the middle of it. He was like, made a killer points, was hilarious, and then was like, I got a set in 5 minutes, I gotta go. And then you were just like, yep. See you later, whatever. And then that was it.
We didn't give a shit about any conventions at all.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
And there was another episode that I felt was like, to me, it's like the most authentically a real green room, was the episode with Doug Stanhope, Dave Attell, Janine Garofalo, Richard Belzer, and Who else was on? Oh, Mark. No, who else was on that episode? At one point during that episode, first of all, Stanhope and Janine get into a little thing.
Oh, right. David Attell, Stanhope, Janine. Yeah, they were all on the same couch.
Yeah, and they got into a thing which was, it kept light and everything, but it was a real thing, you know. And then at one point, I just had to take a leak, so I just got up and left the room and went to take a leak, and they just carried on. And so it just felt like a real green room to me. It felt like there's so little acknowledgement of the fact that this is being made for television that it made my heart sore.
Yeah. I loved seeing that kind of shit too, because it felt like you guys were all having a good time. Everybody knew each other or knew of each other. Even if it was people who just met for the first time, the bond there was comedy and performing and being in that kind of environment.
And they got that the whole thing was about respect for the art form and the people who do it.
Yeah.
And there was no judgment about anything. And, and there's some, I mean, like the episode with Patrice and Bob Saget, there's some real deep conversation happening there about, life choices and things. And I knew that real substantive dialogue would happen because it never has not happened to me when I'm in a room full of talented comedy artists.
Right.
It's never not happened. And much to my surprise, Showtime was like, all right, let's see what happens. And there was one episode where we smoked out on TV. And that was actually the first time that's ever happened. And unfortunately, the show was not as well known among the general public. It took a while for most people are ending up seeing it on YouTube,
right,
uploads. But so it didn't get any sort of attention, and I think somebody else did. I think Bill Maher, I don't know, somebody else did something, and it got all this press and everything, and we didn't.
Yeah.
But we literally, I remember that is the episode Proops was on.
Yeah.
We said, does anybody have any pot? And like 20 people come rushing up with pipes and joints, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, that was great. Did you get? I mean, and Bill Maher did. Yeah, you're right. They got a lot of press. I remember watching the 2 episodes and thinking, he's the second person to do this, but he's getting all the press for it because he smoked with Galifianakis.
He smoked with Galifianakis.
Yeah, on the show on HBO.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Well, I had a great little lifetime Oscar moment where I got to smoke pot with Tommy John. How many people say that?
Yeah, that's true, man. We had Tommy on the show. He's fucking great, man.
He's great. He's great, and he's so smart. And I loved his story. I was so glad he went into such detail on his story.
Yeah, man.
It was so great not having anything planned, and so that was the people in the audience, would contribute something, or at one point I played a clip of Lee Camp, who I knew was going to be the audience, and I knew that Roseanne would love this clip. So I did have that set up, but again, it was like there were things I wanted to do that I never got to because it wasn't really we didn't really have a plan.
Yeah, was there like a guest that you really wanted to have on that you didn't get to grab in time?
Oh, bunches. I will tell you, at one point I almost had the possibility. Well, I did have the possibility of having both Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner together on the show.
Wow.
And this was for the second season. Somebody had taken over at Showtime who is not really the guy you want running comedy.
Right.
And his response to that was, it's 2 old guys.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Horrible.
It was his big complaint about season 1 was that we did an episode with Robert Klein and Jonathan Winters.
Which was I was just thinking about that one. It was great.
I'm like, what are you talking? That was a problem for you? Yeah.
Right.
Wasn't a hip enough show. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah. But for the most part, they were great. It was just when he took over that became a thing. But so I didn't pursue because you have to, a bit of convincing to get those guys to come on, a show. Through the thanks to Dan Pasternak that Jonathan Winters came on the show. Dan Pasternak, who I'm working on some other projects with. Yeah, brilliant guy. He's the guy who teaches me about comedy.
Wow.
And he and Jonathan had become very good friends, and he had introduced me to Jonathan, and he would take me, and then I brought Rick Overton up so we could all, because what Jonathan needed was people to play with, needed comedy minds to play with, and he loved when we would go up there and do stuff. A lot of people used to go. I think Belzer used to go up and hang out with them. I think Billy Crystal used to pop in, and But so
Was Robin gone at that point when Jonathan Winters was on?
I can't remember. No,
I can't either
I'm not
now.
sure. No,
Yeah.
no, he wasn't
No?
gone yet. No.
Okay.
But here's the thing: is that Robert Klein, who's an idol of mine,
Mhm.
was a huge Jonathan Winters fan, and I had never met him. So
Wow.
it was so great to have Klein on with him because it was like Robert Klein was to Jonathan Winters as I was to Robert Klein. You know, I loved
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And they were just brilliant, you know. And Jonathan's stories were so, you know, human and real. And you know, the guy was at the time he was, I think, like 84 years old, and he was still like, you know, dealing with father issues and stuff, and very upfront about it. And it was good. And his son said, I think after the taping, Jonathan's son said, I think he just added another year to my father's life. Like,
Wow.
Wow.
Invigorated by it, you know. And this new guy at Showtime was just me,
Ugh.
two old guys.
No vision, man.
But I think that's like almost like what, to me, like your career is very much like, I like watches, right? But I would never want a Rolex, right? So if you're saying the epitome of like a great watch is a Rolex, like this comedian so and so who packs a theater. But I'd much rather be the guy that wears like an IWC, where the people that know what a watch is are impressed, and everybody else you could walk through the crowd with. And I think that's what you are. You're the like you are. Everybody that's in the know knows you and would go to see you and wants to hear what you have to say. Whereas, you know, just because you're not telling the current climate of what that executive was looking for to pack that theater doesn't mean yours isn't a greater gift to the art form, right? I don't know. That's my perspective.
You know what? I think there's room on the shelf for everything. And after all is said and done, I mean, Showtime, they were great. I mean, they bought the show in the pitch. And basically the show was, it's going to be funny, I promise you. You know, that was basically it. But they loved also the whole idea of, you know, that the audience isn't supposed to be here, and that, you know, this is a private space for comedians. They loved that because that was at the time where they were like, Showtime, no limits, you know.
Yeah.
Not exactly, but anyway. So, you know, I can't really complain about that, but thank you for your kind words about that. But, you know, to me, it's just like, well, I think, you know, there are people who are going to want to see the hottest, you know, newest star there is. And then there are people who are going to, you know, want to see Jonathan Winters. I mean, it's Jonathan Winters. You know, I know the Jonathan Winters episode is going to be in a time capsule for sure, you know, and in fact, you know, the Gary Shandling episode, Judd Apatow used a bunch of clips from that episode in the Gary Shandling documentary because Gary was more open about a lot of stuff that meant a lot to him at the time than he had ever been on anything else. So Judd, who was actually at that taping too, was on the show. You know, he said, "Can I use some of that? Because it's there is nothing else of Gary doing that, you know, being that guy."
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of a cool legacy to leave behind. But really, everything that I've been doing in the last at least 20 years of my life, everything that I've been doing professionally, every project that I've been creating or trying to get out there, is for me at the age of 14. You know, I really feel like there's some 14-year-old out there who's a real comedy fan. You know, I think to myself, when I was 14, if I could watch the Green Room show, I would be like in heaven. You know, that's really what motivates everything. It's like when I think about what I want it to be, it's like I want it to be something that gets me at 14 excited.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, man. Sataristas is one of those books that I when it came out, I would carry it with me to every comedy gig I had. Whenever I was sitting in a hotel room, man, I'd flip through those pages because there's a ton of knowledge from comedians that you do and don't know. And the way you guys kind of go about it in that book, interviewing them or whatever, it's like, how could you not try to absorb as much knowledge from people who have done it for years before you, or, you know, or have a different way of thinking before you? Again, like, I really don't understand people going, oh, Jonathan Winters, who cares? Like, one, he was super fucking sharp on that show. Funny as anybody else who was young and hip or whatever. But he also had that wisdom about him too. And I just don't like, it's cool that you kind of compiled all this knowledge. It really is. It's Aristocrats, Sataristas, Green Room, and then also the set list stuff that you've been doing too, just showcases comedians in a different light, in a different way too. It's insane.
Yeah,
that
well,
you have all.
Setlist is about sort of just that, that spark of creativity, and that in that moment of figuring out, something really funny
In
out
panic.
of left field,
Yeah.
and watching it play out. I mean, it's really about watching the comics gears work,
Yeah.
which is cool. Robin actually was a huge fan of the show, and he used to ask if he could come and do it. And yeah, okay. It's interesting because you think, well, Robin Williams, he's sort of well known for being, so fast on his feet and improvisational and everything. But that's the thing about Setlist, and why Troy Conrad is such a genius, and why so many people said, what if could the audience do the suggestions? And they're like, no. Because the suggestions are created by people that know the process. They're created by comedians, mostly Troy himself, and that's the thing that Robin and a number of people responded to, was that, like, they would get these prompts or these ideas or these suggestions, or sometimes really just random words. Like, I remember one time we just put up 3. That was the words. I had to create a piece out of the word 3.
Right.
And Robin loved that, because it's not completely just like, what can you see in the room, what can you wear. There's a little bit of a constraint to it.
Yeah.
That art thrives on limitations. And so the weird thing is that for a guy like Robin, or Ross Noble is another one. He's an Australian comedian who lives in the UK now. No, actually lives both UK and Australia, but he's very big in the UK. And he's one of these brilliant very Robin Williams-esque, absolutely brilliant. He's an extraordinary comedian. If you don't know him, you should check him out.
I do,
Ross
yeah.
Noble.
He's amazing.
And he said the same thing. He's like, he goes, like, this is actually harder than working the way I normally work, because I can just say whatever I think of, but you've actually forced me to concentrate on something that I have no connection to.
Right.
And that's the genius of Setlist, and why Troy is, what he's done there is so brilliant, is that it is both liberating and constraining at the same time, in different amounts for different people, depending on what kind of a creative artist you are. It's this amazing experience. I mean, I've seen the show thousands of times all over the world with comedians of every stripe. Eddie Izzard did it once, and he just stopped in the middle and he went, "This is fucking hard." It cracked me up. Yeah, are you familiar with Tim Minchin?
Yeah, I love Tim Minchin.
Tim Minchin is just brilliant, right? He had just done an entire week at the O2 Arena in London.
Wow.
And we're doing that, and he came to do Setlist at the Soho Theater in the little basement room, which seated like maybe 90 people. And he was texting from the green room, just going, this is the scariest show I'm about to do right now ever in my life. And he had just done the O2 Arena.
Right.
And I forget who it was that said, it's the closest you'll come to the first time you ever did stand-up.
Wow.
That's what doing Setlist is like, because you really have no idea. You have to let go completely of outcome. So it's this weird Zen thing.
Yeah.
That, you either embrace it or you don't,
Right.
So that was a really fun thing. And our instinct of it was right, was that, you can do this in any language. You can do it anywhere in the world, because the creative impetus is identical. It's a human thing. If you're a comedian, that's the sort of God particle, if you will.
Oh,
so it plays to everybody and anybody.
Right.
So that's been a really, really exciting show to do. And we sold it to TV in the UK. We did 14 episodes, and we had people on it. Like, and what we did was, we had Americans, we had Brits, we had Australians, because we felt like we could do this all over the world. And there's a very well-known comedian in Germany who wanted to do it on German television.
Oh wow.
And so the ones we did for the UK, we shot in Los Angeles, we shot outside of San Francisco, because Robin wanted to do it, and we wanted to make it so easy for him to roll out of bed and show up to do it. So we put it right in his backyard.
That's
and
great.
Then we did some in London. And I mean, Maria Bamford, Gilbert Gottfried, Fred Willard, Hannibal Buress, John Doerr, Robin did it, Eddie Pepitone.
Drew Carey.
Who's that?
Drew Carey.
Drew Carey. We flew him to London to do it. That was a blast, hanging out with him there. And then there were, some pretty well-known British comics like Russell Kane and Roisin Kennedy. And think off the top
Trying
of
to
my
think
head.
of one that I know, and I'm blanking on. Is Skinny Kid? He was on Last Comic Standing when Amy Schumer was on.
Matt Kirshen.
Matt Kirshen.
Yeah.
He was on it. He was great.
Yeah, he's great. He's brilliant, and it's really funny to watch him because when I first met Matt, he was just starting out in comedy, and I looked at him and I just went like this. I said, "You're a writer."
Ooh.
And he was like, "Okay, whatever." And he just came to me about a year ago. We were talking, and he said, "I'll never forget that you did that to me." And he goes, "I didn't really know what to make of it. Guess what? What? I'm a writer now. I mean, he's also a performer, but he's got recognized as a writer. And he was on the writing staff of Jim Jeffries' show and a couple other shows. And he was like, "Man, you called it." And so you watch him do it, and it's like watching a writer work.
Right. Kind of like
you
how
watch
Carlin
Eddie
would do it.
Pepitone do it, and it's like watching, a performer, figure it out. It's just such a fascinating show. And again, all the kudos goes to Troy Conrad for that. But
I know you're working on like new stuff now. How the hell do you leave this kind of? Do you feel like this stuff is finished? Like Green Room, are you in your mind? Are you like, we had a good run and it's over now? Same thing with Set List, or are you always like, I could return?
This is what I was saying is we sold. We did 14 episodes for British television, and I thought for sure we'd be able to sell it to a network here. And in my head, it was going to be, okay, they'll acquire those 14 episodes because there's a bunch of American celebrities on it too,
Yeah.
They'll acquire those 14 episodes, and then we'll do some more new ones here out of, as an American production. But nobody bit, and nobody's bought the show, and nobody's ever seen the British show here. In fact, there's only about 2 or 3 clips from it online. And made sure that stuff didn't show up because we didn't want to muddy the waters. Like we wanted to sell the show here and say this has not been seen.
Right.
I think the only clips online are Robin, Gilbert Gottfried. There's a clip of him, and there's a clip of Maria Bamford. But I think that's about it. But nobody bought it, and I don't know. I have no idea what to do about that. And I tried to get the Green Room because the Green Room, obviously, I own the IP. I could do it anywhere I want. Haven't been able to get either of them back. But no, for a long time, I really just assumed that I would be able to get one or both of those shows going. It just hasn't happened.
Wow.
So I'm not done with it. And, a lot of people, because the Green Room started as a live show, and we did a lot of live versions of it. We did a bunch of them at the Just for Laughs Festival. Some of them were phenomenal. One of them we did in the theater with Andy Kindler and Michael Shea and like 4 or 5 other comedians. And it was like one of the greatest things. And I would get so frustrated after them going, Jesus, why aren't we running cameras? Because that's kind of the nature of the beast, is always lightning in a bottle. And I would always feel like, God damn it, every time,
is there any extra footage? Like when will you film? Like when did you start filming, and then when did you? Because I know you said you'd like to start in mid conversation. So how much of it? Yeah.
Well, we were on, because we did 2 shows a night. We were on a little bit of a tight schedule. So I would say, the shows are a half hour, and we shot at least an hour.
Wow.
In some cases, maybe an hour and 15.
Okay.
We didn't cut out that much, really. In fact, as much as I talk about, we were really striving for the authenticity of it. So, it's like, you're not going to tell them, and then so-and-so got up to go to the bathroom, or so-and-so said this, and then we got off topic for 10 minutes, and then we came back and so-and-so said that. You're not going to do that. You're just going to tell the narrative of why it was such a great night. And that was sort of the motivation behind the editing, was I wanted to what it is we talked for an hour and 15, and this is a film of my recollection of what happened, which is actually probably more authentic than actually sitting there and watching everybody get up to speed. But and again, because the camera work is so dynamic, it made it so easy to cut, because stuff just sort of flowed intuitively, even when it didn't flow visually.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That was the thing too, man. I always felt like comedy, like I always kind of described comedy in a way as like, you know, when you were a kid, there was always that uncle. Like every time there was like a family gathering, there was somebody everybody would be waiting to see, and he'd come in from the outside. He'd be wearing a jacket. He'd grab a piece of cake. Everybody would be happy to see him. Tell a few stories, quick jokes. Everybody would be laughing, blah, blah, and then he'd fucking leave. Never take his jacket off, you know. And then that was it. And I was like, that is what I like. That's how I think of comedy. I go in with I wear a jacket on stage. Yeah,
that's great. Well, actually, you know, I was really, I was at first we were kind of upset that that Showtime just wanted to do a half-hour show because we really thought it was an hour show. We really thought it's sustained for an hour. Like, who wouldn't want to watch an hour of hanging out with these people, right?
Yeah.
But after the fact, after the first, you know, after cutting down the first handful of episodes, like, you know what? There's something really great about it being a half hour. It's almost like it's fucking got whipped.
Yeah, you're wanting more.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're like, where the fuck did everybody go? Are they leaving? You're leaving already? Or when are you coming back?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. So they turned out to be right about that.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
That's the other great thing about, you know, that Zen thing of letting go of outcome is that sometimes, you know, it surprises you in a way that you didn't think would be right. But there it is. It turns out to be better, you know.
Are you guys doing another? I have Dan Dion.
I would love to do the green room again somewhere, but I can't find anybody. And, you know, a lot of people have talked about doing it low budget, doing it online, all this sort of stuff. But in the intervening years, right, it's almost a decade now since we did that. I think it's like 9 years. In the intervening years, it ultimately is now really just a big glorified podcast.
Yeah.
In some ways, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the only reason you could get, you know, Gary Shandling and Robin Williams and actually Robin wasn't on that one, but he wanted to do it too. That was another bummer. I told him at Showtime, I said, Robin wants to do it, right? You know, before they decided not to pick up a third season.
Oh my God. That would have been incredible.
So, you know, the way you could get a Jonathan Winters or a Gary Shandling or a Ray Romano on the show is because it's not just a podcast.
Right.
And that means, you know, some serious production.
Yeah.
And, you know, and commitment.
Let me ask you this, though, because I know you were very meticulous about who was going to be on. If you were to have Robin on, who are you going to have on with him?
Don't know. That's one of the things. It's funny you mentioned that, but yeah, it's like my big creative stamp on it really is the combinations of people. In fact, we scrapped entire shows because one person dropped out.
Wow.
Because it wasn't about, well, who's available, we have a slot to fill. That was not the point. You know, there's a reason Caroline Ray is on that show with Colin Quinn. You know, there's a reason that Kumail Nanjiani is on the show with Richard Belzer. There's a reason. It's funny too, because when we had the lineup with we had Judd Apatow, Ray Romano, Mark Maron, and who else was on?
Gary Shandling and Bo Burnham. And
Gary Shandling. I had Shandling, Maron, Romano, and no, Bo wasn't on it yet. And I was looking at the lineup, and I was like, you know, other people, you know, from the production would come in and go, "Oh, that's going to be a great show. Those are also great." And I was like, "No, it's not quite. Something's not right." And then while I was talking about this with one of our line producers, I get a phone call saying Bo Burnham's on the line. And I was like, because I had called him to see if he wanted to be on, and I just went, "That's it." And that's why the show has 5 people on it. I was like, "Oh, that's it." And it's like by putting Bo on that show, suddenly it became interesting to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the fact that we have Judd and Ray and Mark Maron and who the fuck else was on that? I can't remember.
No, I think it was Ray Romano, Mark Maron, Gary Shandling, Judd Apatow, Bo Burnham. I think that was it.
There were 5 people, yeah. But it was that kind of thing. It's like, you know, I was really not thrilled with that lineup until Bo became a part of it. And then I was like, now I see how everybody is going to connect to Bo in a different way.
Yeah.
You know? And I knew Bo because I've known Bo since he was like 16.
Oh, wow.
I tried to do a project with him. Remember Super Deluxe?
Yes.
Yeah.
They asked me to do some stuff, and I was like, you know, I want to do something with this kid. And I remember calling Bo, and I said, "Hi, my name is Paul Provenza." And he goes, "You're not really Paul Provenza." And I was like, first of all, the fact that you know who I am, I automatically love you. You're a genius. You know, that really taught me right off the bat that, oh, this guy's a deep diver already at 15, 16. He was 16. And then he said, he had to call back because he was on a school trip or something. And I was like, how the fuck old are you? You know? And I booked him in the Lakeshore Theater in Chicago. And it was like his first live gig was at Montreal. the Just for Laughs festival, and then I booked him in this Lakeshore Theater in Chicago, and he had to come with his dad. He was too young; he wasn't even 18. So I kind of go way back with him, and right from the get go, I knew this is a really special cat. This kid is too smart for his own good.
Right.
I mean, like 2 years into doing stand-up comedy, he was like, "This whole thing is a sham." I was like,
yeah, that's pretty great.
So I had this connection with Bo, and I knew that Judd knew of Bo, and in fact, they were negotiating a deal to do something together at the time.
Nice.
And I knew that Mark didn't know him from Adam.
Right.
Gary didn't know him from Adam, and I thought that's going to be hilarious, because I also knew that Bo is so smart that Gary would be shocked and surprised at how smart this kid is.
Right.
And it's exactly how it played out. Putting Patrice and Roseanne and Bob Saget on the same show was a really elaborate chemistry. There was really a lot going on with there, because I knew that Patrice, if you ever see Patrice on, Tough Crowd, or listen to him on Opie and Anthony, he's a bully.
Yep.
But I knew that Patrice also, and my relationship with Patrice was different. I never experienced that with him. Like, we would have real heart-to-hearts, but I never felt like he was bullying me into anything. But I knew that that was his nature, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that if he were on with Roseanne, he would be intimidated by Roseanne, because it's funny how that works, right?
Right.
But I knew that Roseanne had seen him on TV, and she didn't know his name. But she said, that guy's really something.
Right.
But I didn't tell Patrice that Roseanne had ever seen him. So Patrice was intimidated. But I put Bob on the show, because Bob and Patrice, they had been on the road together. So I knew they knew each other. And I knew that Bob, who I've known since 1975, by the way.
Wow.
I knew that Bob's instinct is to just be doing shtick the whole time.
Right.
And corny jokes and being goofy Bob, which is brilliant and hilarious. But I wanted something more interesting, and I knew that Patrice would not allow Bob to not get interesting, because Patrice won't stand for that. If we're having a real conversation, Patrice will make you have a real conversation, whether you want to or not. So it was a really interesting dynamic, and again, it was just from knowing these personalities and knowing these people and knowing the histories and who knew what, whatever. And of course, Sandra was on it to give Roseanne a comfort level. And I've been a huge Sandra fan. When I first moved out to LA in 1980, and I met Sandra Bernhard then, and I thought she was amazing, completely unique, unique.
Absolutely,
and really a real strong point of view and an interesting character. Sandra Bernhard wanted to be the kind of woman that she wasn't, and created that character, did that character on stage, and became it. Right. And so I think Sandra's just absolutely a fascinating character. And I knew that Sandra and Roseanne obviously had worked together. So I was like, Sandra, who I love, I know she would rise to any occasion in any conversation. I knew that. And when she'll give Roseanne a level of comfort, Roseanne will keep Patrice in line. Patrice will keep Bob in line. And it was like kind of this experiment, and it just worked out beautifully. Wow. And so that was really my sort of creative stamp on the show, was like, I'm putting the right people together to get some interesting shit going on.
You're like a mixologist, but for comedy, man.
It's kind of like I was making cocktails. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're like, what the fuck? That is incredible.
And then I just got out of everybody's way,
Yeah.
Which was great fun.
That was always. Oh man.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to dwell on that, but you guys keep asking great questions.
No, dude. I'm like obsessed with that show. I fucking loved it for so long. And the Sataristas book was also just feel like almost like an extension of it, because it was people that I didn't really get to see on the show, and heavy conversations. Obviously,
really, once again, it's another one of those things that goes way off point, because it's more interesting. I mean, like when you hear Janine talk about religion, that's not really about satire. That's more about Janine. But boy, it informs everything else. And it took a long time to edit that book, man. Because they all flow into each other, and that was a really difficult, challenging, just structural thing, was to have people pick up on each other's thoughts,
right?
And again, when I did the interviews, they were very free form. That has a lot to do with why I decided to back away from performing for a while, because doing this stuff that's sort of not putting me out in front,
right,
is where I can have the epiphanies.
Was that feeding your soul more, like to be from that angle of it?
Well, I never realized how fulfilling that could feel. I feel like, first of all, and Drew Carey and I had a long conversation once about doing comedy that comes from egolessness.
Yes.
Which is really hard because it's you on a stage and people are paid to come and see you and to hear you and your thoughts and what you have to say. It's really hard to be working in comedy and still kind of embrace egolessness.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of stuff that I'm doing is closer to that without putting myself out in front. I'm putting other people out in front, and I'm sort of, trying to contextualize their work in a way that creates something a little bit different. And, so I'm kind of enjoying being, so I'm working on a couple of doc projects right now, and I love them because it's not about me. It's about, it's about me in that there's a million ways you can put this stuff together, and I'm putting it together in the way that is, the way I want to express it, but it's not me that's out in front,
Right. Well, you're the conductor in a sense. You know what I mean? Like you have this vision.
I guess that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, absolutely everybody that I'm working with is way the fuck funnier than I am. So why not sit back and enjoy that?
When you were, was there like because I think Sataristas came out around 2004. I could be wrong. 2006, 2000.
No,
maybe no later.
Aristocrats in 2005. Sataristas, that was actually about 2010, maybe.
Or 10?
It's later.
Okay.
It's later. Yeah.
Because it was like I remember thinking like you had really interesting people in it and talking about awesome stuff that I'd never heard them talk about before, which is great. And then it was like, was it a conscious? Because I feel like Jon Stewart popped like around that time really huge too. But you had Colbert in there instead, which I didn't get to hear a lot. Was that a conscious effort?
Well, the people that have not gotten involved with these projects are, that's a whole other, list of interesting things. And I don't mean that in a critical way. But I mean, it's like everybody thinks Jerry Seinfeld was in the Aristocrats. He's not, they just because everybody else is,
Right.
Right. That's kind of funny to me that if you have enough people contributing to something, it doesn't matter who's not contributing. To something. So it didn't matter that Jon Stewart wasn't in it,
Right.
But that was purely, because John was way, way too busy to do anything. And, you have to deal with the realities of life and people's schedules and all that sort of stuff. And then management,
Sure.
Sometimes managers are, just like, don't get involved with anything that's not $1 million deal, you're too big for that,
Right.
But the reason that Stephen Colbert is in it actually is a bit of a fluke because I know him from way back when, and I'd met him. I don't really know him, but I had met him and of course watched his rise and had written a couple of pieces about how what he was doing was just like almost indefinable.
Right.
There was some sort of alchemy that he was doing that I just thought was, really breathtaking.
Yeah.
And I was a regular on Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR.
Oh yeah. It's a great show.
Yeah. And Stephen Colbert was one of the phone-in guests on an episode that I happened to be on.
Nice.
Actually, in the middle of the taping, I said, "Hey, Stephen, can I call you about something else?" And and he was like, "Aren't we in like the middle of a taping?" So he said, "Yeah, sure." And then I called him and did the interview with him over the phone. But it was one of those weird flukes that, I probably couldn't have gotten to him and couldn't have gotten his attention to pay enough time, to give me the time or focus enough because he's also pretty busy at the time.
Right.
So that turned out to be kind of a fluky thing. But I was really delighted because I think that he's so extraordinary. And so many of the other comedians in the book talked about the work that he was doing being like, it's mysterious, it's a hard thing to do the comedy math on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was cool for me too, because it was the first time I think I'd really seen him talk to another comedian about something like that extensively. You know what I mean? It was really, really deep stuff about the comedy and the art of it and his own philosophical belief, about doing that kind of shit. So I thought, oh my God, what a great addition to this book, because he's not talking about it.
Yeah.
It was pretty great.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, listen, I kept you for an hour and a half. I want to thank you for coming on because I feel like I could just talk to you forever.
I know.
Well, let's do that sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well,
I have no future. You may as well be it.
Two things. One, I got to ask you the big three questions that we ask every guest that's coming on. But Greg Proops did tell me to tell you to say hi and that sorry he wasn't coming on next. We had to reschedule him. Do you have anything to say to Greg?
I adore you. I love you in a way that is inappropriate for another man.
I will let him know. It's funny. We were hanging out with Colin Mockery the other night, and I told him Greg was coming on too, and he goes, "Great, just say hello to Greg, and then sit back, and an hour and a half will go by."
Well, look at his podcast. His podcast is like it's like James Joyce had a podcast.
That's so true. I fucking love it. He's the best. He's hilarious.
A beautiful guy too. He's a great human being.
Awesome. Really I can't wait. And you're welcome to come back on when he's on too, by the way. As soon as we reschedule him, you can pop out anytime you want. This is your show now. So
I'll put a stop to it. The longest time I was like every show that I ended up being brought into casts when shows were already like, in their decline, like I went into, Northern Exposure as it was, in its winding down, right? I went on to Empty Nest and it's winding down. There were a couple of others like that where I got brought in, long after it had reached its peak. And so I was actually had in my resume at one point, it said Paul Provenza, the scourge of primetime. You want to kill a show? You bring me in.
As soon as they hang your photo up on the hallway wall, it just starts to crack the foundation. By the way, I got to tell you now, because you brought it up, I fucking love Empty Nest. That's a great show. Richard Mulligan, fucking hysterical. We had Marsha Warfield on, and I said to her that she has the same theory, because I said, how come all these shows are in fucking rerun? Why isn't Empty Nest? And she goes, I have a theory that any show that I'm on, and I was like, she goes, they refuse to give me residuals, so they just won't show it.
And you know what? Marsha Warfield, one of the greatest stand-ups ever. Yep. She is phenomenal.
Genius.
I still quote one line of hers that just slays me, where she talks about, she said, this is old stuff. She doesn't do this anymore, but she said, I was reading one of these, Cosmopolitan or whatever, and they said, the sexiest thing on a man, women, they polled women and they said the sexiest part of a man is his eyes. And she just goes, I have eyes. She's a maestro, a total maestro. God. But you mentioned Richard Mulligan. I got to tell you something.
Yeah.
Richard Mulligan, I would sit there and I would watch him and I just think, man, if he were around at the time, it would be Chaplin, Keaton, and Mulligan.
Right?
His physical comedy is unbelievable. He was brilliant. Brilliant. Is amazing. Just to be on the same set with him. There were times where, I would go up in the middle of shooting a scene because I was just so riveted by Richard Mulligan. Right, I'm here too. I forgot,
Yeah.
Incredible. And you know what? Dinah Manoff, man, she would sit at the read-throughs with the script, and we'd be reading the script, and all the writers who wrote their particular jokes would laugh harder at their jokes, and that's just one of those kooky showbiz things,
Yeah.
But and it would be the read-through, and then they'd say, okay, any questions or comments, and she would go, yeah, and she will look at that script in minutes, tell you everything that is structurally wrong with it, where every character is being compromised, where a character is letting the steam out of a scene. It was breathtaking.
Wow.
Her script analysis was like that and on the money every single time. And you know how writers sometimes they'll come, well, we like this. We think you should do this. They'll make excuses for whatever. But they would listen to her stuff and they'd go, she's just right about everything. She's phenomenal. Phenomenal. And one last story.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned Empty Nest. This is the context.
Yeah.
So when I started working on the show, it was right around the time that Christy McNichol was going through her personal travails.
Okay.
And so she was kind of off the show on, some episodes that they would write her out because she needed some time on her own, whatever. And then she'd be back for a few episodes and whatever. And at one point she left the show. And because Richard Mulligan's character on the show was a pediatrician, they would do scenes where he's at his office, and so they would have a bunch of extras that were like little kids in the waiting room to see the pediatrician. And I remember being at lunch one time, and then these kids are all, they're all pros. They're all pros. They're showbiz kids, And we were having lunch once, and this one lovely little girl. I mean, she couldn't have been more than 7 tops. Real sweet, soft-spoken little girl. And she comes up and she asks Dinah Manoff for an autograph. And Dinah said, "Oh, sure, sweetie. I'd love to give that to you. What's your name and how do you spell that?" And the little girl goes, "Can I ask a question?" And Dinah says, "Of course. What do you want to know?" She says, "Where's Christy?" And Dinah says, "Well, Christy has some things that she has to deal with. She's not really very healthy right now, and the doctors told her that she needs to not go to work so much. She's probably not going to be on the show much until she's better." And the girl goes, so she's not going to be here on the TV show?" And Dinah says, "No, not for a while." And the little girl goes, "Oh, but that's good for you though, right?" Tell me, is that everything you need to know about kids in show business?
That's amazing. So great.
You know, right?
Oh, fuck. That's hilarious. Oh my God. I feel like I know I keep telling you we're gonna go, but now I gotta say you must love Soap, the show.
Oh yeah.
I am dying to talk to, the original creator of that show and stuff, because it's like it was so ahead of its time then, but it's still, I watched that. I have them on DVD. I'm gonna finish the sentence in a second. I started like 3 sentences at the same time. But yeah, I lied. I really do. I watch it like every year on DVD. It still fucking holds up. Yeah, it is it is funny, fucking situationally, like just satirizing TV soap operas, mafia culture, homosexuality. They handle amazing.
Isn't it wild to see how they handled the gay character? Like what a big fucking deal that was. It was wild, right?
It was crazy. And the what's the guy's name? Because he was a comedian. Well, he was the ventriloquist. The guy I can't think of.
Oh, come on! Now
I know.
Jay Johnston.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
He was so fucking good. Between him and Richard Mulligan, you talk about, physical comedy. Whenever Richard Mulligan would react to that dummy and him, I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious. And when Bert is, now we're just reminiscing like TV shit, like my family at Thanksgiving. Remember the episode?
But maybe we'll create a little renewed interest in Richard Mulligan, who deserves it. I'm telling you.
I agree.
Indeed.
Chaplin, Keaton, Mulligan. He's that good.
Yes, absolutely. When he would go invisible, I mean, come on. That is just hilarious.
He was just great.
Good. Yeah.
Just great. It was beautiful watching him work, being part of that. So that was the thing about that show is that, they brought me in to kind of be an edge on the show a little bit.
Yeah.
The show. And there was talk about like when the show finally finishes its run, we can do spinoffs, and we want those spinoffs to be a little more edgy and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They always say that, and then it's the same, sort of bland sitcom stuff. But the experience of being on that show and working with those people was phenomenal. And Park overall, holy crap, is she a natural?
Right.
She's great. They were really, really great. I mean, I've been on a lot of shows and a lot of sitcoms where people are just, they just TV pretty, or they hit their marks and they know how to time a joke, but that's like the extent of what they're about.
Right.
This show, everybody on it was just a real artist. I mean, you could just see every one of these people doing, the highest end, acting work possible. I always felt like Richard Mulligan should have been a much bigger movie star. He's great in some of that Blake Edwards stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was great. He was great in everything, man. He could do the drama, he could do the comedy, everything. Yeah. He just seemed like a great guy.
And the dog was great too. Love that. Love that dog.
Best physical.
You know how great that dog is? That dog spent 8 hours every day in the makeup chair. It's a cat. That's how good that dog
is. Fucking great, man. All right, ready? Big 3 questions. End of the show. First question is, if you can go back in time and talk to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself that would help you today?
Well, I actually do have an answer for that. There was one thing in one career move I made that I know came from the wrong place. When I first did the Tonight Show, my first Tonight Show spot was kind of crazy killer, kind of crazy. And I don't even take credit for it because the guy who helped me work out the set, named Jim McCauley, he was the segment, he was a talent coordinator at the time. He stacked the deck in my favor. He didn't tell me that the joke that he had me close with had a personal connection with Johnny. Because Johnny had just been recently, I was doing a joke at the time about, remember, this how far back it goes, early 80s. Remember Gloria Vanderbilt designer jeans?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was doing a bit then about Gloria Vanderbilt hawking these jeans, and she had like the worst. In fact, the joke that I couldn't believe they let me do was that if she had one more facelift, she'd have a goatee. And I know some people have heard that joke, but I'm telling you, that was my joke. Anyhow, so he had me close with this bit, and Johnny just went nuts on the show. And then at one point, I'm looking at the audience, and I see they're laughing, and I'm having this out of body experience, and I know. And then they're all looking at Johnny and laughing. And I turn out of the corner of my eye, I see Johnny. Johnny's he's crazy how hard he's laughing at this stuff, right?
Right.
Well, I found out after the show, Jim McCauley told me that Johnny's then very recent ex-wife was like best friends with Gloria Vanderbilt, and that Johnny hated Gloria Vanderbilt.
Oh,
so he didn't tell me about this, but he stacked my deck, right?
That's amazing.
Okay, so that spot was so killer that they asked me back on the show the next week.
Wow.
And out of fear and insecurity, I passed.
Oh my God.
And I would tell myself, fear and insecurity are going to make you make all the wrong choices.
Wow.
That's what I would tell myself. So there. What's your other two bullshit?
That's great.
That was a great one.
That was a great answer.
Somebody earlier actually brought up that clip. Just pulled up Paul on the Johnny Carson Show on YouTube Classic. It's funny.
Seriously? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Way earlier in the cast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Matter of fact, John, I just want to touch on some of the, because we had
go
so
for
many
it. Here's
great
some of the
questions and comments. So I just wanted to try and touch on some of them. Hank P.A. asked, hold on. Nope, wrong one, Hank.
Thanks, Hank.
When is the Andy Indris documentary coming out? He was asking.
Soon. I would be working on it right now if it weren't for these guys. Yeah, no, this is an amazing documentary. Andy Andrus is a comedian. You may not know him, but he's also best friends with Doug Stanhope.
Nice.
Are you guys familiar with Stanhope?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Love Stanhope.
Well, along with Doug Stanhope and a couple of other nut jobs, Andy went to confront on camera his childhood molester. And so this documentary is leading up to that footage, what exactly happened and what drove Andy to do this and the aftermath of that. And, so it's a really challenging piece, because all the footage is, I'm basically working with found footage. It was just Andy and a couple of guys with cameras just shooting randomly. I came into it after the fact. The only thing I was responsible for actually shooting were a couple of interview segments. But the rest of it is just footage that I had nothing to do with. So it's kind of like working with found footage and putting this together. And, nobody was actually going, okay, there was no game plan. There was no like structure. And I was just like, what's going to happen? Let's just run cameras on it. And I'm talking about for months leading up to them actually going and doing it and then going and doing it and all that stuff. It's just random. And also the other aspect of it is that it's a comedy about child molestation. And that's a really tough hill to climb, because I want to be respectful of, the truth of how serious this is. But also,
I thought you meant because of how many of them there were out there right now.
What do you mean?
No, I thought you meant because of how many comedies about child molestation are out there at this time.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I heard that Goldthwait was doing Call Me Lucky, and I was like, "Ooh, I hope this doesn't step on it." So I called Goldthwait and I say, "Can you let me see it? Do you have a screener online or something?" And he was like, "Sure." And I watched it, and I was relieved that it was so dramatic, because because that's the thing about this is a way of treating this subject in a way you've never seen before, and it actually is kind of a paradigm for other ways to deal with this reality that somebody
Mhm.
may have suffered in their lives, that it doesn't always have to be morose. And that
Right.
doesn't make any less meaningful an event or any less horrible an event or any less, it's not excusing anything. But the point is, at some point, you got to get past it and move on. And
Yeah.
Andy did it by being as funny as he could about it. And
Right.
so the movie's about not only the actual event of it, but it's also about, what comedy can do and how you make comedy out of tragedy and what the effect of that is. And
Yeah.
just working on a lot of levels. And I'm sure there are people who've been busting my balls because I've been working on this thing for a million years. But the reason is that it's, again, I'm dealing with nonlinear footage and I'm dealing with subject matter that the balance just has to be right. I don't want
Yep.
anybody to think that we're making light of anything that happened to anybody, to Andy or anybody for whom this happens to in life,
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a very, very tricky thing. And it's also, there are times where I've had to take time away from it because as funny as it is, and as funny as Andy is talking about it, it's just hard to go through the reality of it,
Right.
dealing with the story about what happened and how it happened and all the things around it. And then all the stuff you read around it, because, I've gone down the road of, learning about this and about people's response to this happening and how pervasive this is. And then I had some people very close to me in life that, their lives have been really fucked up by things that happened to them like this. And it's started to sort of get to me too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do. The other thing too is you're right. I don't think people realize, especially like in the last 10 years, the generation coming up, that comedy is a way of dealing with,
Trauma.
really traumatic issues and shit like that. There's so many people who think you can't joke about a thing. And it's like, yeah, but you have your way of dealing with traumatic issues, whether it's therapy, whether it's reading quotes online or or comfort food or whatever it is. Our way of doing shit like that is to mock it till it no longer affects us in a way that's harmful.
That you're getting into some of the themes of Sataristas right there. Is that when what Andy did was he took control of what it was doing to him. He took control of the fact that it happened. And, the fact that it happened, the fact that most child abuse happens is a complete and total loss of control. You're completely powerless. You have no control over it. And then it continues throughout your entire life, having control over you. But by making by making the choice to say, what's the funniest jokes I can make about this, gave him control over the fact that it happened to him. And that's a bit of a paradigm shift for, I think, most people. And that's what I was saying when I watched Call Me Lucky. It was like, once again, it was like, Barry Crimmins, I mean, he actually went to, Congress and, to debate the issues, paying attention to, for people who suffered from child sex abuse and stuff. And, he took it very seriously and all. And there was nothing funny about, how Barry dealt with it. But there is stuff that's funny about how Andy dealt with it. And it was just like, even watching Call Me Lucky, it was like, you do not see any discussion of this reality that is pervasive in our society. It's pervasive all over the world, one way or another. You never see it handled in any other way but morose.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that people who are morose about it are wrong. I'm just saying that there is no other paradigm.
Yeah.
And Andy, I think his story is pretty fucking interesting. And I think it might make a difference to a lot of people who are like, I don't even know how to deal with this. Well, there's a whole world of a way to deal with it that nobody's ever really let you see,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So that's my answer to that question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry it takes so long, but it's not. It's because I care so much.
Yeah.
No, but that's what's great about it.
Do you want me to move on to the other one, or you got any more?
You know what? Let me grab one more because
grab one more.
So, Matt Nappo actually asks, why is British TV more stand-up friendly? Why do you feel?
I don't know why. But it is. I mean, look at primetime broadcast television. Nothing. There's no stand-up, and there hasn't been almost forever. The only time you started to see stand-up outside of the late-night talk shows was when cable came along, and you were seeing Evening Improv and Showtime on the Road, in prime time. But the broadcast networks were never interested in it. And even if you look at, I'm not talking about like Netflix or whatever, where it's just, pick whatever's on their shelf, but I'm talking about, even Comedy Central. There's no stand-up.
Right.
For some reason, they don't put stand-up on TV that often. And,
Right.
on one hand, I guess they feel that, well, that's a Netflix special. That's their thing, or HBO or Showtime. It's their thing, but they just don't. Why is the Brit TV landscape more amenable? I don't know, but all over British television in prime time, you have different formats. You have panel shows. You have things like 8 out of 10 Cats. You have things like I can't think off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of shows where panels of comics talking about news events, or panels of comics doing a thing, or they have the comics. They're not necessarily doing stand up, but they're presented, in their glory as comedians. We don't have that in America, and I don't know why. It's a really frustrating thing. I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's huge. People love it. People love it.
They do.
I don't know why. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I have relatives across the pond, and they seem to know and like love their stand-ups in a way that Americans do not really care for.
And there are stand-ups who become household names over there without people ever seeing their stand-up, because they're on TV all the time on all these panel shows.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I don't get that either. Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I remember when I was a kid, HBO Young Comedy Special, that was like an event, like a prime time. You know what I mean? Like it would come on a thing. But now, if Comedy Central airs stand-up, it's at fucking 2:00 in the morning.
If
exactly.
No, it's so. I just don't get it. Don't get it. And I can't think of a more cost-effective production than a stand-up show.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't get it.
And the bummer thing is too, is like, I swear to God, and this is going to make me sound like a curmudgeonly old dude, but like I could walk out of a room and you could put any stand-up on any of the late night shows and I could not fucking tell them apart, because I feel like to get on those shows, you have to have the same cadence. You have to have the same time shit. And there's nobody like unique.
When you do 7 minutes, on a talk show, all you're doing is a commercial for people to come and see you live.
Right.
That's all it is. You can't.
So it's not enough.
You can't. I mean, there's very few people who, like, right out of the gate, you get who they are and what they're about.
Right. It's a bummer. So that's not enough for people to look at it and go, I want to see this on prime time. It's just like, oh, it's just some stand up on late night TV, and maybe we'll go see him live.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't get it. For a long time, Dan Pasternak and I would talk about this, and I had this theory that for a long time, the idea of doing stand-up on broadcast television was like low rent, because that's how all the cable channels, that was like their first original programming was stand-up, because it was the cheapest, easiest thing for them to do, and boom, they had original programming. They didn't have to hire writers. The production is really simple. They didn't have to, spend. So it seemed like stand-up kind of became the province of what, I guess, this is my theory, that the broadcasts were like, oh, that's low rent. That's that's for the cable stations to do, not us.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's just a theory.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So the second question in the three questions at the end. Second question is, what had to end in your life in order for you to wind up where you are today? What had to end, good or bad, in order for you to wind up where you are today?
Say that one more time.
What had to end in your life, good or bad, in order for you to wind up where you are today?
What had to end in my life?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you right off the bat. My father had to die. Huh? Am I an upbeat guy or what? You want escapism? I'm your guy.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
well, why
my dad was a pretty severe guy. He had a great sense of humor, but it wasn't a thing we shared. He was very, Italian disciplinarian. He was an industrial chemist by occupation. He was a career military in the National Guard. He was a lieutenant colonel when he died. He had been in almost his whole adult life. And he was a very severe, hard-nosed guy. And, his idea of discipline was actionable now, really. Mm-hmm. Go to jail. Not even joking,
Right.
And there's no way in hell, if he were alive, that I would have been able to go into comedy.
Wow.
And I actually spoke to a therapist friend of mine, a psychiatrist friend of mine, who said something real interesting that, about whatever my issues were at the time, that's really, something that probably is resonating in me, that, in order for me to do what I'm doing, my father had to die.
Wow.
She said to me, she goes, "You think that could fuck you up?"
How long did it take for you to come to kind of terms with that was an okay thing for you to acknowledge in yourself?
I don't think that I have. I think I just have to live with it.
Right. All right.
No.
Yeah, good answer, man.
That's the thing, is that, it's that weird sort of Mobius strip, because if he were alive, would he have been proud of what I've accomplished? Or,
right.
Like my mother, all of a sudden, everything, she was not like, he wasn't like, "Oh, you can't do that," or, "No, you got to get a steady job." She wasn't like that.
Right.
But when it was clear that, when I did the Tonight Show, and she could tell all her friends that I was on the Tonight Show, and they were all going, "You're kidding. Oh my God, you must be so proud." Everything became okay for her, I don't know if that would have happened with my dad, or,
Sure.
like, I don't remember. It wasn't like we sat around and like there were people I talked to. They go, "Oh yeah, my father and I, we would sit and listen to Bill Cosby records and laugh our ass." And that wasn't that wasn't me and my dad. So I don't know, But it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy, man.
Any other uplifting questions you got?
Yeah, I'm like, well, the next one's.
I'm such a downer.
No, you're not. No, these are great, man.
Third question is, when do you remember when your first pet passed away? You want to hear all that?
Yeah, that's the next one. Where are they buried?
This sounds like a bank security question.
He's got us, John. He's got us.
He knows it. I already got his last 4 digits of his phone number. Oh, fuck. This isn't even a show. So the last question is, ties into the show, so this could be kind of fun, is if this was a genuine dystopia, right? And it's everybody's last day on Earth.
It's not?
I know. The trick is that it's our last day. We know it's our last day. What would be your epic death? How would you want to go out?
Laughing, baby. Laughing! Laughing! I'm going to put George Carlin's Jamming in New York on. I'm going to watch him talk about how humanity is destroying itself, and I'm going to laugh as humanity destroys itself.
Love it.
I like a good meta.
Yeah, that's great. So we have, what we do is we have an artist draw the cover of the podcast episode based on that answer. And I'm already thinking of you in a reclining chair with a joint and an TV watching Carlin, and behind that is the destruction of the world.
I'm going to frame that, put it on my wall.
I will send it to you, already framed.
Please do.
Done. Awesome. Thank you so fucking much for coming on, man.
I hope I wasn't too boring.
No, God, no, not at all.
We had nothing but great comments the whole way through, too. Not necessarily questions, but like even the last comment was from the more, "Wow, man, this guy still has his A game, laughing my ass off." Vicky said earlier, this is like a comedy masterclass. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you guys are sweet. I wish I could read those comments.
Yeah.
I'll print those out for you, too.
But you're not showing me the other ones. You're not showing me the ones you don't want me to see.
Oh, no, yeah. Some of them.
The rest are just
you're not showing me the ones that say, "This guy killed my favorite TV show."
I love Dreyfus.
Yeah. The rest are just emoji eggplants and jerk off motion. So that's,
dude,
I think those are normal.
I aspire to that. That's awesome, the thing. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you what a bunch of crap the fucking Oscars is. Okay. Seriously, why are you giving any of these people awards for shit? The porno stars, man. I don't care how good these fucking actors or actresses are. None of them ever make you come. And those people don't get awards. They don't get recognition. There's no TV special for them.
Oh, that's great. That's so true. He's right. I agree.
True.
Yeah, fuck it.
All right, you guys, it's been a blast. Thank you. I've really had a great time. Now I feel like I'm actually upbeat. What have you done to me?
Yes,
that is a sign of the apocalypse when I'm upbeat. It's been fun. Give Greg Proops my love, and let's talk again sometime.
Absolutely, man.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Dystopia tonight.